The Epstein files show many of the richest and most powerful men on earth leading lives of sexual depravity and moral degradation. How can this news lead to a life of appreciation and joy? Welcome to the 5D Playbook, where we reveal the light within the news. The sheer number of the world's elite willing to debase themselves with Epstein's pleasure services suggests we are not dealing with the poor moral judgment of a few individuals. Instead, we have technicolor insight into the workings of the human collective psyche. It's this insight that can set us free. Epstein was a master influencer. He gave presidents and billionaires a sense of exclusivity and status. He offered underage sex and probably a lot more. The bedrooms were filled with cameras, so that in return for forbidden pleasure, Epstein gathered dirt that could be used for blackmail. One of the key remaining questions is, where are those tapes? With money and power, why did so many succumb to Epstein's offers and the subsequent life of slavery through the perpetual threat of blackmail? The answer is that they were never free in the first place. Every one of them lives with a fake identity with guilt at its core. Let us unravel how each believes that they are to blame for the suffering of every man, woman and child on earth. Because this self-image is repulsive, it is repressed in the unconscious. Lurking in the dark recesses of the psyche, it expresses itself through compulsive acts of harm to others and self-depredation, as we see in the collusion with Epstein. As you may have guessed, this self-image is not confined to the rich and powerful. It is the collective consciousness of humanity. We may not be invited to Epstein's island. Yet, war, junk food, obesity, porn are just some of the ways we compulsively express that same core belief of guilt as Gates and Clinton. In other words, with the 5D decoder, the Epstein files have just spilled the beans on what keeps us all in a state of suffering. Do we really want to follow Clinton and Gates and have no control over large areas of our lives? How did guilt become the basis of our identity? Learn more in the 5D Playbook. For now, let's just dive into the basics. Around 1500 BC, the Earth was engulfed in a worldwide cataclysm through a near-miss encounter with Venus. You are likely never to have heard about this event because one of the first aid measures to help our chances of survival when immersed in overwhelming events is amnesia. We simply forget. In the 5D Playbook, I give examples of lengths we as a society go to in order to perpetuate a fantasy world that helps to keep us forgetful. For example, why the brutal witch hunt instigated by academics against Immanuel Velikovsky when he published evidence of the Venus event in his 1950 book Worlds in Collision. Now, a second first aid tactic we employ in catastrophic situations is guilt. We blame ourselves for what is happening. By blaming ourselves, we regain a sense of control over an otherwise intolerable situation. The first aid works like this. If I'm to blame for what's happening, then I'm not powerless. However bad it makes me, just look what I've done. In other words, those that survived the events of around 1500 BC took on the belief that they were responsible for the suffering of every man, woman and child on earth. As their descendants, we hold this same belief. As this guilt is more than most of us can bear, we repress it. Confined to the unconscious, we allow it to express itself in compulsive behavior that does us no good. Does this make sense of why Gates, Clinton and a host of others fell in with Epstein? Does it help explain why they allow themselves to be blackmailed? Isn't blackmail just another way they perpetuate an unacknowledged monster self-image? This is what makes the Epstein files such good illustrators of how to set ourselves free from our own fake guilt-based identity. It is this identity that keeps us not only acting compulsively, but addicted to the belief that the lies, wars and corruption presented in the news actually describe the real world. In fact, nothing could be further than the truth. Here is why. Clinton, Gates and others make decisions that influence many of us. Do you start to see why there is no end to the bad news? How can good come from a driven, guilt-based identity? It can't. But here's the key that sets us free. The original guilt is not true. Our ancestors were not responsible for the near miss with Venus. Guilt was simply a survival tactic. It has no basis in fact. The near miss with Venus just happened. But we believe the guilt is true, and that is the start of the illusionary world of pain and suffering we've lived with ever since. Based on this original fantasy that we are to blame, Clinton, Gates and others did things on Epstein's island to reinforce their belief in guilt. In doing so, they simply reinforced an illusion. Despite what you read in the story of Adam and Eve, our ancestors did not do anything to feel guilty about. So like us, Clinton and Gates go about in the world acting from beliefs that at their basis are pure fantasy. The consequence is that they perpetuate a fantasy world around them. It is this fantasy that we take for the real world we watch and read about in current affairs. Because guilt and other beliefs such as shame, hurt, self-loathing are negative, the fantasy world they generate is one of harm, suffering and despair. Sound familiar? This is what makes the Epstein files such a powerful story that can set us free from the shared illusion we might otherwise have known nothing about. It enables us to shift state so that we can choose our own reality instead of the real world presented in the news. You're probably going to ask what lies beyond the illusion. I'm not going to go into that here except to say that before around 1500 BC, cultures around the world describe a golden age of peace and abundance where the gods were close to man. Only after 1500 BC, when the connection with the gods was broken, did mankind's troubles begin. That is to say, around 1500 BC, there was a profound change of state as to what it meant to be human. The Epstein files suggest to me we may now be undergoing an equally radical change of state. There's been child trafficking and depravity for millennia. Why is it now being so blatantly exposed, except that the illusion is fading? In any case, what matters is not discussion about past events, but the actual experience of a new way of being on the planet. My experience suggests that if you take this path, you're not going to be disappointed. With its 3 videos and ongoing support via Zoom and a private Facebook page, the 3 Steps to Freedom program by Troubles Away is specifically designed to enable you to step aside from the so-called real world presented in the media into a reality of your choice. It's one way to get most out of the Epstein files. To your new reality. It's a new day. When the past is gone, anything is possible.